If there was one thing Ethan Vale understood, it was survival. The moment he woke up inside the world of a power fantasy web novel, he already knew his fate. In the original story, Ethan was the arrogant, villainous side character who obsessed over the female lead, betrayed everyone around him, and eventually died in humiliation. At first, Ethan tried to avoid the plot completely. Then he met Elena. She worked quietly at a small bakery near the harbor city of Ravenhill. Soft silver blonde hair, pale skin, tired blue eyes, she wasn't important to the novel. Just another unnamed background character, but she smiled at him once. That was enough. What started as casual comfort became something terrifyingly real. Ethan rented a tiny apartment with her. They stayed awake eating cheap takeout while rain tapped against the windows. A year later, they had a son, Oliver, a chubby little boy who laughed whenever Ethan tossed him into the air, for the first time since transmigrating. Ethan forgot this world wasn't truly his. Then the system activated, main storyline deviation detected, villain route correction initiated, return to female lead immediately. Ethan panicked. Novel's plot was brutal. Anyone connected to him would eventually suffer. If he stayed beside Elena and Oliver, they would be dragged into the destruction waiting for him, so he made the cruelest choice of his life. He lied, late at night. While Elena slept beside Oliver's crib, Ethan wrote a trembling letter. He claimed he had terminal cancer. He said he didn't want them to watch him die, and before sunrise. He disappeared for 3 years. He buried every memory of them while following the storyline like the system demanded. He moved to the capital city. He approached the female lead, Charlotte Ashford. He became exactly what the novel wanted him to be, a devoted admirer, a useful pawn, a man pretending his heart wasn't already buried somewhere else, but fate wasn't finished with him. Yet because the day Charlotte finally introduced him to her family, Ethan opened the mansion door and froze. On the sofa sat Elena, holding their son blind and wearing black mourning clothes, the Ashford mansion suddenly felt too small for breathing. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears as Elena slowly lifted her head toward the sound of footsteps. Her eyes no longer focused. They were beautiful even now. Pale blue and empty, Oliver sat quietly in her lap. Clutching a toy train, the little boy looked older, thinner, but unmistakably Ethan's son. Charlotte smiled naturally beside him, completely unaware that Ethan's world had just shattered. "Ethan," she said softly, "this is my older sister, Elena." Sister, the word nearly destroyed him. Charlotte continued, lowering her voice, "My brother-in-law passed away from cancer a few years ago. My sister hasn't recovered since then." Ethan's fingers turned cold. "She cried so much she eventually lost her eyesight," Charlotte whispered sadly. "Please be patient with her." Every sentence felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. Elena tilted her head slightly. "Charlotte," she asked quietly. "Yes, your guest." His footsteps sound familiar. Ethan stopped breathing. Charlotte laughed lightly. "You've been staying inside too long. Everyone sounds familiar to you now." But Elena didn't smile. Instead, she tightened her arms around Oliver. The boy suddenly looked directly at Ethan. Children remembered more than adults realized. Oliver blinked slowly, then whispered one devastating word, "Daddy." Silence, absolute silence. Charlotte frowned in confusion. Ethan forced himself to crouch beside the child. "You must be mistaken," he said carefully, but Oliver kept staring. His small lips trembled. "You look like him." Elena's expression changed instantly, for the first time since Ethan entered the room. Emotion cracked through her numb face, fear, hope, pain. Her fingers shook violently. "Oliver," she whispered, "don't say things like that." The little boy lowered his head obediently. Ethan felt physically sick. Charlotte noticed the tension and quickly changed the subject, guiding Ethan toward the dining hall. But before leaving, Ethan glanced back one final time. Elena sat motionless in darkness, like a ghost abandoned between life and death, and Ethan realized something horrifying. The system never warned him that the female lead's villainous sister would be his wife. Dinner at the Ashford mansion became torture. Charlotte chatted casually about business investments and social events while Ethan barely heard a word. Every sound from the next room distracted him. Oliver's tiny footsteps, Elena's quiet coughing, the soft piano music playing somewhere down the hallway. Everything reminded him of the life he destroyed. "Seem nervous tonight," Charlotte observed. "I'm tired," Ethan answered. Charlotte studied him for a moment before smiling. "You'll get used to my family." Family, the word felt cruel after dinner. Charlotte excused herself to answer a phone call. Leaving Ethan alone near the garden corridor, that was when he heard Elena's voice behind him. "Why did you come back?" Ethan turned sharply. She stood several feet away, one hand lightly touching the wall for guidance, even blind. She somehow looked directly at him. "I don't know what you mean," he replied carefully. Elena laughed softly. "It wasn't warm. I recognized your breathing the moment you entered the house." Ethan's chest tightened. "You shouldn't be here," she continued. "You already died once." Her calmness terrified him more than anger would have. "I had no choice," Ethan said quietly. Everyone says that before abandoning someone. The words landed without mercy for several seconds. Neither spoke. Then Elena asked the question he feared most. Was any of it real? Ethan looked at her trembling hands, the woman who spent years mourning him, the woman who literally cried herself blind, and despite everything, he still couldn't explain the truth. How could he tell her he came from another world? How could he explain a system forcing him toward destruction? So he lied again. "Yes," he whispered. Elena's lips trembled faintly. "That makes it worse." Before Ethan could respond, Oliver suddenly ran into the hallway. "Mom." The boy stopped after seeing Ethan this time. He didn't hesitate. He walked directly toward him, then wrapped tiny arms around Ethan's leg. "Daddy came home." Ethan nearly broke apart right there, and behind him, hidden from view, the system notification appeared once more. Warning, plot instability increasing. Over the next several weeks, Ethan became trapped between two impossible lives. During the day, he accompanied Charlotte to elite parties, charity galas, and corporate meetings. To outsiders, they looked perfect together, elegant, powerful, compatible, but every evening, Ethan found excuses to remain near Elena and Oliver. He repaired Oliver's broken toys, cooked meals when Elena forgot to eat, read bedtime stories while pretending it meant nothing. The dangerous part was Elena, it was himself, because the more time he spent with them, the more he wanted to stay. The system hated that. Villain route divergence, 63%, corrective measures pending. One rainy night, Ethan found Elena alone on the mansion balcony. Thunder rolled above the city. "You shouldn't stand here alone," he said. Elena smiled faintly. "I used to wait for someone on balconies." Ethan swallowed hard. "You know," she continued quietly, "Charlotte always believed I was the cruel sister. What? In this family, she's the heroine. I'm the difficult one." Elena turned slightly toward the rain. That's how stories work. For the first time, Ethan realized how lonely she truly was in the original novel. Elena barely existed except as a side obstacle in Charlotte's life, a cold older sister, a future villain, nothing more. But reality was different. Elena wasn't evil, she was simply abandoned too many times. "I hated you," she admitted suddenly. Ethan looked down. "You should. But hatred gets exhausting after 3 years." The rain intensified. Then Elena whispered something that shattered the last wall inside him. "Even after you left, Oliver still waited near the window every night." Ethan closed his eyes, because some guilt never faded, and some people remained home no matter how far you ran. Collapse began at Charlotte's engagement banquet. Hundreds of influential guests filled the grand ballroom, while crystal chandeliers illuminated the Ashford estate. Officially, Charlotte hadn't accepted Ethan's proposal yet. Unofficially, everyone already considered them future husband and wife. The system seemed satisfied. Main storyline stabilized. 89%, but Ethan felt nothing except dread. Across the ballroom, Elena sat quietly beside Oliver, beautiful, distant, untouchable. Then disaster arrived. One of Charlotte's political rivals publicly exposed Ethan's past identity, old records, hospital documents, a death certificate proven false. The ballroom exploded into chaos. "You faked your death?" Charlotte asked in disbelief. Ethan's silence answered everything. Guests began whispering. Immediately, fraud, manipulator, scandal. Charlotte looked genuinely hurt, but Elena simply stood up slowly. The entire room fell silent as she walked toward Ethan despite her blindness. "You promised me," she said softly, "that you were dying." Ethan finally broke. "I was trying to protect you. By abandoning us," his voice cracked, "I thought the world around me would destroy you if I stayed." Elena's expression trembled. For the first time, years of grief surfaced all at once. "You destroyed us anyway." Oliver suddenly started crying nearby. That sound shattered whatever remained of Ethan's defenses. He dropped to his knees, not caring about the watching crowd, not caring about the storyline, not caring about the system's screaming warnings inside his mind. I loved you, he admitted desperately. I still do. The ballroom froze. Charlotte stared between them in stunned realization, and above Ethan's vision, the system displayed its final message, critical error. Villain route failed, system shutdown initiated, then everything went dark. When Ethan woke up, sunlight warmed his face for several seconds. He remained motionless. No system notifications appeared, no mechanical voice, no invisible pressure controlling his choices, only silence, real silence. He slowly sat up and discovered himself inside a familiar room, small apartment, open windows, the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Then he heard Oliver laughing. Ethan rushed toward the sound in the kitchen. Elena stood beside the counter while Oliver sat drawing pictures with crayons. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. Elena noticed him first. You're awake. Her eyes still looked cloudy. But softer now. What happened? Ethan asked carefully. The doctors said stress worsened my condition, Elena replied. After surgery, some of my vision returned. Ethan nearly stopped breathing. Oliver ran toward him instantly, this time. Ethan held his son tightly without fear. No system interrupted. No storyline demanded separation, just warmth, just family. Elena watched them quietly before speaking again. Charlotte canceled the engagement announcement. Ethan looked down. I'm sorry. She wasn't angry, Elena said. Only disappointed you lied to everyone. That sounded exactly like Charlotte for a long moment. Silence filled the apartment, then Ethan stepped closer. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Elena studied him carefully. Fair enough, but then she added softly, still, Oliver deserves his. Father emotion tightened Ethan's throat, outside. Rain began falling lightly against the windows, just like years ago in Ravenhill, except this time, Ethan didn't run, he stayed, because after crossing worlds, surviving fate, and losing everything once already, he finally understood something simple. A peaceful life with the people you love was never a side story. It was the only ending worth choosing.